Okay, so the interview CD, the Stephen Wilson mix, has come out tomorrow, I believe, Friday. I will definitely put a purchasing link just below this video. So my first question to you is, how happy are you to give Stephen Wilson free hand, no pun intended, to tinker with the Gentle Giant back catalogue?
Um, well, I mean, Stephen actually doesn't tinker. He's very much, uh, I wouldn't say hands off, but he is very respectful
Yes.
of what the band has done, and effectively, really kind of like makes it sound the way we would have liked it to do it back in the day. And we obviously either didn't have time or the technology, etc. So we're very happy that he's able to do what we would have loved to do back in the day, and give the mixes that he's done already, which I'm and the whole band is very pleased about. Um, the instruments that have more space and air and more sort of clarity. We at the time when we put them together, we did, not in a rush, but certainly we were uh, um, obviously aware of the time limits and the money limits that we were up against. But Stephen has the technology, so we're very happy that he tinkers with our music.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a wonderful job on the on those Jethro Tull albums as well, which are
Oh
just
yeah,
absolutely remarkable.
yeah.
Um, what's the conceptual conceit of interview born out of your frustration with the music press?
I wouldn't say it was frustration. I would say it was more, um, but probably more in North America when we were touring, and the some some radio stations, even though they had to play Gentle Giant because we'd become that popular, but didn't know too much about the band. And I think that kind of yes, the frustration is probably a decent word because they asked the very same questions, not really caring what they asked about. They were kind of almost rote, and there were things that how did you get your name? When did you start? I mean, things that were kind of meaningless. And I think some of that was um, some of the lyrics were about those kind of things where the band, and what we were doing didn't matter to some people. It was basically because they had to play the music because we were quite popular at that point.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, very popular at that point, and certainly in North America and other places. So I think there was elements of frustration, but it was also, um, the yeah, I can't even think of the words, but yeah, the meaninglessness of the questions that they really didn't care about.
The endless grind of
Um,
it.
exactly that. Yep. And to tell you the truth, a similar kind of thing happened in the UK. But yeah, we were not we were looked upon as kind of like pretenders as opposed to the real thing, which is
Yeah.
okay. I mean, it wasn't then. We were kind of snarl, but nevertheless, in retrospect, it probably was best
Yeah.
because it stood the test. Well, I guess in some respect, the music stood the test of time.
Well, it interesting brings me on to a question I was wondering really. What was your opinion at the time of the other 70s prog bands, and did Gentle Giant feel an affinity with them?
Um, well, in those days, in the '70s, there wasn't kind of like you know a title for the bands that were around that are listed under prog. We were just bands that played different kinds of music. So to tell you the truth, I was looking. Somebody sent me some of the shows that we were on, and we play with the Eagles and we play with Black Sabbath. So I mean, we weren't on this damn prog bill with Crimson, yes, et cetera, et cetera. So there was not really such a thing back in those days. So honestly, we had no um, uh, there wasn't an affinity. However, one band in particular were great friends of ours, and in fact helped uh, our band become quite popular in a lot of places. And they were Jethro Tull. We mentioned them before.
Yeah.
Ian and the band, they were, they started before we did, and they offered us a slot in 1972 in both Europe and North America to open for them, and that kind of opened the doors to us becoming fairly popular in various parts of the world. And so I tip my hat to Tull and those guys, and we still remained, and we were friends then, and we became friends on the road, and remained friends till this day, actually, with Ian and the guys.
Well, interestingly, Jethro Tull in '72, of course, released Thick as a Brick, their mother of all concept albums, as Ian calls it. But Ian also says that it was in part a slightly prog parody, where he's kind of poking fun at the other progressive rock bands around him. Did you feel that at the time?
You mean that Ian was poking fun?
Well, the Thick as a Brick album, he says, is a little bit of a prog parody, really. I don't know whether
Um,
at the time whether you felt that was the case.
no, actually, we toured on that. We toured with Ian and Tull during that period. Um, I, it's good to reflect back and say certain things were this way and certain things were that way. But I didn't feel that it was a parody. I think it was just a concept.
Mhm.
From what I saw and heard and knew from what they were doing. They were honestly they were at their prime during that period of time. And to be on the same bill as Tull when they were completely, I mean, they were amazing. I mean, amazing band, amazing show, and and we were mutually respectful and mutually we enjoyed each other's music. I remember, seeing the band watching us from the side of the stage, and we did the very same thing. No, I honestly don't think, or yeah, I may be wrong, and Ian may well be, looking back and saying, well, it was this and that, but I didn't feel like it was a parody at that point. I mean, it felt like him telling a story about, having a newspaper about this boy and et cetera, et cetera. So it's good to be a Monday morning quarterback, as they call them here. But I don't, I didn't feel that way at all during that period.
Yeah, doing some research, I read an interesting opinion from one critic that said that after the band's strong album Free Hand, they were pressured to rush out another album to blow on the sparks of commercial success. Do you agree with that assessment of the interview album? Did you feel pressured to put out an album to blow on the sparks of commercial success, so to speak?
I think no, I don't. We weren't pressured by the record company. I think we were pressured by ourselves. To tell you the truth, we toured a huge amount
Yeah.
on Freehand. I mean, we went from country to country, continent to continent, um, and um, and we were headlining, very, quite big places. That we were talking about, stadiums actually in certain places. And I think that uh, we were, we wanted to maintain or and maintain and or garner even more success at that point. Bands, if you like, of our ilk were starting to get tracks, singles on the charts. There were, the Genesis and the Yeses were getting one song, and radio was changing in America, and probably the same way in Europe. So we came back from, I think, I don't know what, a North American tour, and wrote Interview in a fairly quick fashion. I think had we had a little more time to reflect back on, um, just to reflect back on what we wanted to do to go further than Freehand, I think Interview would have been a little more. Can I put this? A little more thought out and less you say frustrated, and you'd have heard a little less frustration, a little more optimism, if you like, and a little more forward-thinking stuff. But nevertheless, I think the album itself is a very strong album, and especially Stephen's ability to make it the way we would have loved to have made it.
Yeah.
I think it's, but I think I would, now reflecting back on it, I think we would have done better to have about another 2 or 3 weeks of writing, so that a couple of songs were not written, and could have been put into that album that would have made it a great follow up to Freehand. I think it followed up Freehand very well, but I would, in retrospect, I'm doing a Monday morning quarterback on me now, on us. I think that we probably should have spent a little more time in writing, but nevertheless, what we had came out as well as it could. I mean, I think it's a great album, actually. And now that I'm hearing it, the way that, again, Stevens has remixed it, I can't fault it. But I remember at that time thinking, I wish we had a little more time to record. Our bad, my bad. We should have given ourselves a little more, time, because we had tours lined up, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, speaking of Stephen Wilson again, I mean, I was listening to Three Piece Suite, that compilation. He says that many of the early tracks on those early albums, the multi mixes, they no longer exist. And I'm thinking, well, given all the technological jiggery pokery that can be done now with AI, and obviously they've generated a new stereo mix of the Revolver album by separating all the elements. Do you think we'll ever see a kind of a nice deluxe mix of those early albums?
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure if I really want them to. I think, I look, if there's a demand for it, of course. But I think, I don't want to. And I don't think the band would want to milk our fans. And we've, the good thing is, and the interesting thing for me is that the band has fans 40 plus years after we broke up. I mean, that was the idea that I'm speaking to you about an album which was recorded in 1975 or whatever it was, which is like, I mean, we're talking about decades and decades, is fascinating to me. And had you said to me in 1980, 81, 82, I'd be speaking about music we made, several years before, I'd have just laughed at you. I thought, but these are long gone. They'll be buried and blown up somewhere in a Chicago car park. But no, I'm not worried about regenerating the early ones. I think the one album I think I would love to have remixed and redone is In a Glass House. That one in particular. And in fact, Stephen, when he first approached us way back, and he's become a good friend. That was the first album he wanted to do. He said, I just need you must have that one remixed. And that's the only album, unfortunately, we can't find the multis on.
Okay, that's a shame.
So yeah, it is, because that album is in some ways a very important cornerstone for the band.
Sure. Frank Zappa named you as one of his favorite groups. In what ways did Zappa influence your music?
A great deal, actually. There was a period of time when, uh, as some people may know and may not know, I was in a group with my brothers before that.
Simon
Before,
Dupree.
yeah, Simon Dupree, the Big Sound, and that became this kind of like this, I don't know, this bad luck charm that followed us around in England, especially. But when we heard Zappa in the late '60s, and the Mothers of Invention, we thought, holy shit! I mean, this is a band that's playing, jazz and orchestral and rock and pop, something that we'd love to do, but based on what we're doing right now. we're making good money. We can't do it. But his music was very influential in making the Shulman brothers, if you like, break the early band up and say, okay, let's do something which is completely 180 from where we were. So
Yeah.
yes, absolutely a very important band in our development.
Yeah. Okay. How did you manage to lure Tony Visconte away from David Bowie for him to produce your first album?
There wasn't a lure. It was basically our manager,
Uh-huh.
um, Jerry Braun. He was a fantastic guy, and he was the manager of Simon Dupree.
Mm.
And when we told him we wanted to break the band up and start something brand new, and to develop it and get new musicians, he said okay, and in fact, subsidized the band, which in the next marketplace, I mean, it's something that no one, it's crazy to do that, but subsidize uh, our vision, if you like. And when we were rehearsed for about 4 to 6 months with new music and got our band together, if you like, recruited Kerry and Gary, etc. And Jerry and the team contacted uh, Tony and said, "What do you think?" And Tony said, "Yeah, I'd love to. They sound great." It wasn't like, "Please, would you do it? Please, please." So Tony was, we were. I remember us doing sessions with Bowie in the same studio. He was doing 3 hour sessions with Mark Bolan and T. Literally, he was doing 3 albums at the same time. I tried initially the first album, and next door was Queen. With Roy Baker. It was a time when everyone was doing everything, and there was no sort of like, wow, you've got this guy, this we're all this, that you can't capture a period of time, if you like, from the late 60s to early 70s when everyone was doing everything, and it was almost like a magical period of time. And Tony was loved the band, and he also basically became a part of the band. In fact, I mean, he taught us a great deal about recording, and also was a fantastic musician, and actually played on some of the first couple of albums. The
Sure.
recorder parts on the first album was Tony.
Okay. Okay.
It was yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Obviously, when Simon Dupree and the Big Bad World broke up, Elton was gone, and Kerry Minnear comes in for Gentle Giant. Was it Kerry Minnear's interest in Baroque music that in part fueled the band's interest in counterpoint and things like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kerry was an incredible influence on the brothers, if you like,
Mhm.
um, because he just graduated from the Royal Academy of Music with a degree in composition as well as percussion. So in both regards, we came from a musical family, as you probably or people probably know.
Mhm.
So music was any kind of music was important, but being good musicians was more important than anything. And Kerry was a superb musician as well as composer. So yes, his influences in Baroque and medieval music was influential to the Shulman brothers, if you like.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Big fan of Yes, big fan of Roger Dean. I'm just interested, why was Roger Dean's artwork for Octopus not used on the release of that album in the USA?
Um,
I think his artwork is much better than the artwork that was used in America.
it's a good question. I think Columbia Records at that time, who we were signed to, um, that I'm not sure if they liked. They didn't. I mean, in those days, I mean, the record company would, dictate, and the band didn't, had a say, but certainly didn't, wasn't able to, weren't able to, dictate. And I don't think they liked the cover.
Okay.
So we said, well, we'll find something else. And in fact, what we did was we were in San Francisco, and actually I found this jar with the octopus in it, and I said, "What about this?"
Okay.
And they said, that looks good. I if I make a story up that but I don't think they actually liked Roger's um, illustration. I think it's his best. I personally think it's his best ever cover,
Yeah, I'd
including
agree.
Yes and Elsa Beast and everything else. I really do. It's a superb cover and a painting and has it's not sci-fi. It's a it's a different kind of thing for Roger. And I think it's our best cover actually.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some digging actually. Apparently, you were on the bill at the Astoria in 1967, supporting the Beach Boys. I wonder if you remember that gig. Did you meet Brian Wilson? I mean, what was that like? Because the Beach Boys were, a big thing then, weren't they? And like, certainly when they were
Oh
60s,
yeah.
66.
Oh, we were still semi. I mean, we were just. I think we were semi-pro or just getting into pro. We had a couple of singles out that were doing their top 40, but we didn't have our big hit yet. Yeah, I remember Of course, I remember the tour, and they were, to tell you the truth, assholes.
Really?
Oh yeah, completely. You know, yeah. I mean, especially Dennis Will. I mean, he really not pleasant people.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I mean, they were. Yeah, it's unusual because usually on the road when you're touring with lots of other bands, we always try to get on. And in one hand, or not even one hand, two or three fingers, I could think of bands who did get on, we did get on with, but they were certainly one, and and they were really uh, not pleasant to anyone on the bill. Forget our band, we were the lowliest band on the bill. But yeah, they were not pleasant, very unpleasant actually. But also at the same time, they couldn't play. They were hopeless. I'm being honest with you. Yeah, I mean, Dennis Wilson as a drummer was I could play better drums than him, and I can't play drums. So honestly, they weren't very good. They had some backup players as well, so that's why they sounded decent. But no, they were unpleasant.
Yeah. You're not a big fan of Pet Sounds then?
Oh no, I'm a huge fan of Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
No, I love the music, but live and personally, they were not very pleasant.
Well, I know Mike Love apparently can be problematic, but I always thought
And
Brian
him as well.
was Brian there at that time, or had he kind of taken a back seat to touring?
I don't think he was there at that time. I'm just, but I remember Dennis and Brian. There was only one. Al Jardine was actually. I mean, we're talking about many. He was actually okay. I mean, you come, bands would come to the dressing room, say "Good show" or "How you doing." I think he did, but the rest of the band, they were just like really ignoring anyone on the bill, not just our band. There were other bands on the bill that were well known.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, they were unpleasant. And now, as far as music is concerned, Pet Sounds, one of my favorite all-time albums.
Yeah, absolutely. We are the Moles. I mean, how did that come about, and where did that Beatles rumor spring from?
Okay, so this was our manager at the time, my brother-in-law, um, who actually saw that we were getting uncomfortable with being a pop band and wanting to, move on to what other bands were doing. I mean, at that time in the '60s, late '60s, bands like the Idle Race and the Move and Band of Joy were morphing into different kinds of bands, and we wanted the same thing. So he said, I'll get you 3 hours in the studio for EMI. Just write a song that you think is cool, and we'll so we wrote We Are the Moles, and he was basically he was his marketing ideas. I mean, I think we wrote the song in about 5 minutes,
Uh-huh.
and it was just me and my brothers. It was just me, Ray, and Phil. We played on the album or the single, should I say? And we put it out, and the buzz was it was really happening. However, um, we didn't know at that point that in the studio at that time, Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd were recording as well.
Hmm.
And when the buzz started to happen, And people saying, "Wow, the Beatles! It's a Beatles song. They want to call themselves the Moles. We got to buy this." Well, Syd Barrett did a big interview saying, "No, it's not. It's not the Beatles. It's the shitty band Simon Dupree." So he blew the whistle on us, you know.
Wow.
So yes, Syd was the it was the whistleblower, which we were disappointed at because it could have, we could have started Gentle Giant a couple of years before. That was our intro to putting new music out there to get to have an audience, a different kind of audience, if you like.
Yeah. Did you have any meetings with Syd Barrett at all?
Um, you mean afterwards or during that period of
Oh, at
time?
any time really, because I'm just in because
Well, yeah, we played it. We did some shows with Pink Floyd originally, back in the day, our first band, and we got on fairly well with them, but they weren't, to tell you the truth, when they first started. I mean, it's weird to say this, but before pre-Arnold Lane, they were just getting their stuff together, and they had this gigantic amps and gigantic. I think they were the first band to get an advance for BMI. And We did a couple of shows with them, and I'll say this again: they weren't very good. They obviously turned out to be brilliant,
yeah.
but at that point, they weren't. They were just loud and noisy and not very good. But so but they were pleasant enough. I mean, they weren't, they weren't, uh, controversial, or they weren't nasty like the Beach Boys.
Mhm.
But we didn't really get to know them that well.
And interesting, Ian Anderson, he recalls seeing Pink Floyd way back in the early days, and he said, like you said, they weren't very good, but you could just tell there was a spark there was some magic.
Yeah,
Um, and of
that's
course,
true. I mean,
Pipe at
yeah.
the Gates of Dawn was an incredible record, I think.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. We talk about that time. Pete Townsend. He said that the counterculture was nothing more than youthful idealism and drug-fueled hope. Is he being a bit of a curmudgeon, or do you think he's hit the nail on the head?
Uh, I'll take the former. Yeah, it was a period of time when the youthful generation, the young, the young people in England especially, drove the culture, and it was a time when there were so many things happening. It was the late '60s. There was optimism, the pill, the female, they were able to go out and screw around without getting pregnant. There was a whole it was a counter revolution, and the youth culture drove the culture across the board, and it was an incredible time for creativity, where we would do things ourselves. Rather than going to university and following in whatever footstep you're supposed to follow. You could do things, and not feel weird about doing them. It was a period of time in those 3 to 4 years or 5 years, should I say, where everything seemed possible. It wasn't particularly driven by drugs, honestly. I mean, yes, there were certainly drugs around, but I mean, as far as we were concerned, and I would say Tull and a lot of other bands, it wasn't about drugs. It was about um, the whole revolution that the youth brought to the population. And the Beatles obviously started it, and it went on from there. And then the late '60s, early '70s, it was a period of time which, again, if I could bottle that and sell it, it would be worth billions of dollars, because everyone and every young person wanted to do something different. And I was part of that, and I'm so happy that I lived through that period of time, because it wasn't big corporations that drove the culture. It wasn't marketing. It wasn't branding. It was about being creative and doing something brand new that you didn't know where it was going to land, but it was a place where you could try everything, and if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, no problem.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Interesting. Gary Steele, in his book on A Gentle Giant, said that three friends, the group at this point, were grappling with the challenges of self production and a blues influence that would never be overt again. Do you agree with that assessment?
Um, well, I think we were I think we weren't grappling with blues. We love blues. I mean, that was part of our, the
Grappling with
blues.
self-production, he said.
Self-production. Well, that was the first album we produced ourselves, of course, and I think we were. I think that in some respects we were very ballsy. I mean, I have to tip my hat to Tony Visconte, because on the second album, he basically took a back seat. I mean, he was an incredible mentor and
Mm,
a teacher. And on the second album, Acquiring the Taste, he was there, but when we put our hands all over the faders and the and on the EQ knobs and everything else, he would let us do it.
yeah.
And when we said we want to produce ourselves, he was supportive, and he said, "Go for it, guys." So I don't think we're grappling with production. I think we were grappling with where we were going. Not grappling. We were just like a band. A band is like how can I describe it? It's like a lifetime. You're born. You become a child, an adolescent, and then a young adult. And then you become a mature person, and then you become a little old, and then old age sets in, and then you go 60 under. And I think the life of the band is kind of like that. And I think we were kind of like very adolescent during that point, in writing and even recording. So I think we were we were challenging ourselves. We weren't a mature band at that point, and blues was certainly an element because Gary was a blueser. He didn't know from jazz or classical or whatever. So we were a rock band as well. I mean, that's something that when people say a prog band, um, the most important thing for us was we were a rock band that played kind of different music, but rock was what we loved,
Yeah.
and rock is derived from the R&B.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have one more question for you actually, and that is you wrote in the notes for Acquiring the Taste, our goal is to expand the frontiers of contemporary music. Do you feel that goal was realized?
Well, that was a little. Uh, I'd say that was my brother Phil.
Okay.
That was his quote. Um, in some respects, it was true, but in other respects, I think it was a little. I'll say the word pretentious.
Mhm.
We want to. Yes, we want to expand ourselves, but not at the cost of not being popular. I mean, any band that goes on stage, I don't care who they are. I'm sorry, if you get on stage, you're a platform above your fans. So whether bands who say, "Well, we don't care about popularity or we don't care about the fans," when they go on stage, there's the elements of you're playing to someone. You're there to entertain, no matter what, and play your music to either get an audience or get endorsed or whatever. So yes, we wanted to be popular. So part of it's true, and part of it is bullshit.
Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. I'll repeat what I said at the start. That interview will be released tomorrow. The Stephen Wilson mix, and there is a purchasing link just below this video. I urge you to go out and get hold of a copy of that. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I wish you. What time is it where you are at the moment?
It's about 2:35, 2:40, I think. We're about, yeah. So
So you've
I'm
got your
I'm
whole
five
day
hours
ahead of you.
behind you. Oh yeah, I've got a couple of other things, including putting our digital stuff up in North America. So yeah, I've got other things, but yeah, I'm happy that we could talk, and I think interview that Stephen has put together. It surprised me that I, at one point, I'm just, finishing up here. It wasn't. It was in my top four, but now now I've heard it, Stephen's version of it. It's on my top two or three now of our albums.
Really, what's the best Gentle Giant album to buy? Do you think?
Power and the Glory.
A good album, yes, very good album. Octopus is, I think, probably my favorite. I absolutely adore that record.
Yeah,
Uh,
me too.
Anyway, Derek, thank you so much. You enjoy the rest of your day. All the best, mate. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks very much.